morning sun peeked through the dense trees, casting soft rays of light over the lush, green landscape. It had rained the night before, and the fresh scent of wet earth filled the air. Birds sang sweet melodies, while the rooster's crow could be heard in the distance. It was a peaceful and beautiful morning, one that seemed to promise hope and calm, but not for Serafina. Serafina, the young woman at the heart of the story, stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of porridge. Her movements were mechanical, as if the act of cooking had become nothing more than a task to fill the time. Her life had been full of such monotonous days since her marriage to Victor, a man she barely knew, and his mother, the notorious Matilda, whose harsh words and cold treatment had turned Serafina's life into a never-ending nightmare. Matilda had never been kind to Serafina. From the day they met, she had made it clear that Serafina was an outsider unworthy of her son. The older woman would often criticize her cooking, her cleaning, her mannerisms, and her very presence in the house. No matter what Serafina did, it was never enough for Matilda, who would always find something to complain about. Every day, the young bride would hear Matilda's shrill voice from the other room, cursing her, belittling her for her shortcomings, and telling her that she was not fit to be in this house. Serafina. Matilda's voice echoed through the house, sharp and commanding. What have you done all day? The house is a mess, and you still haven't prepared the afternoon meal. Are you just sitting around waiting for your husband to do everything? Serafina flinched, her body tensing at the sound of her mother-in-law's voice. Her hands gripped the wooden spoon tighter as she muttered under her breath. I'm trying, Matilda. I'm doing my best. But Matilda didn't hear her. Or if she did, she didn't care. Best. Ha. Your best is nothing. I was the one who raised Victor. He deserves better than this. Do you even know what it means to take care of a household? Serafina felt a familiar weight in her chest, a crushing weight that she had grown accustomed to. The endless criticism, the constant feeling of inadequacy, it was all too much. But there was nothing she could do. Victor, her husband, would never stand up to his mother. He was always too afraid of Matilda's wrath, too terrified to even speak in her defense. To him, his mother was the queen of the house, and Serafina was just a guest, an unwelcome one at that. She tried to keep her composure as she continued cooking, the silence in the kitchen broken only by the rhythmic clinking of the wooden spoon against the pot. It was all so suffocating. The house that was supposed to be her home felt more like a prison. But there was a fire inside Serafina, a fire that was slowly growing, building with each passing day of torment. As Serafina stirred the porridge, her mind wandered back to the day she first met Victor. She had been a village girl, innocent and full of hope, when Victor had come to the village to visit his distant relatives. At first, he had been charming, kind, gentle, and attentive. He had taken an interest in her, and for the first time, Serafina felt like someone cared for her. They had fallen in love quickly, and Victor promised her a future filled with love and happiness. But soon after their marriage, reality had set in. Matilda's disdain for Serafina had been immediate and fierce. She made it clear from the start that Serafina was not good enough for her son. She would criticize her every chance she got, reminding her that she was nothing more than a poor girl from the village, unworthy of the life she had married into. At first, Serafina had tried to ignore the cruel words, telling herself that things would get better. But they never did. Instead, the years passed, and with each passing day, Matilda's control over the household grew stronger, while Serafina's spirit withered. She had once been full of life and ambition, but now, she was little more than a shadow of the woman she used to be. All she wanted was peace, but peace was something she could never find in this house. "Serafina, get in here now." Matilda's voice rang out again, more forceful this time. "I've had enough of your laziness. Do you think you can get away with slacking off while I do all the work? Get in here and do your job." Serafina's hands trembled as she set the spoon down. She wiped her brow and took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had learned to remain calm in the face of Matilda's cruelty, but inside, a storm was brewing. She walked into the living room, her heart pounding. Matilda was sitting on the couch, her eyes narrowed as she looked up at Serafina. "What is this mess?" Matilda demanded, gesturing to the room. "The house is filthy, and you're just sitting around, doing nothing. This is your home now, but you can't even keep it clean. How do you expect my son to live like this?" Serafina clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to tell Matilda everything she had been holding inside for so long. But she couldn't. Not yet. She wasn't ready to risk it all. Instead, she forced a smile, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside her. "I'll clean it, Matilda. I'm sorry. I'll get to it right away." But Matilda wasn't satisfied with that. She stood up and walked over to Serafina, her face twisted with disdain. "Sorry isn't good enough. You need to learn your place, girl. You're lucky I even let you into this house. Don't forget that." Serafina nodded quietly, her mind racing. But deep inside, something was shifting. The weight of years of mistreatment was starting to take its toll. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear: she couldn't live like this forever. Something had to change. As she turned to leave the room, a thought crossed her mind. She had been patient for far too long, but patience was a silent killer. The fire inside her was growing stronger, and one day, it would ignite. Whether she was ready for it or not, the time would come when she would have to decide: keep suffering in silence or fight for her freedom. That night, as Serafina lay in bed, her thoughts were consumed by one thing: revenge. She didn't know how, but she knew that one day, she would get back at Matilda. No one had the right to treat her the way she had been treated. And if it took everything she had to free herself from this prison, she would do it. She closed her eyes, her heart racing. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it would be hers. And she would fight for it, no matter the cost. Serafina's days began to blur together, each one identical to the last. The constant criticism from Matilda, the absence of support from Victor, and the oppressive weight of her life left her feeling numb. But something inside her had changed. She could feel it building up like a storm on the horizon. Her patience was wearing thin, and soon, she would no longer be able to keep it all inside. The night after Matilda's latest outburst, Serafina found herself sitting by the window, staring out at the darkened sky. The house was eerily quiet, with only the occasional creak of the old wooden beams disturbing the silence. The moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Serafina's fingers traced the edge of the window frame as she thought about everything she had endured. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside her door. Her heart skipped a beat as she quickly stood up and walked over to the door, peeking through the crack. It was Victor, his figure silhouetted against the dim light from the hallway. "Serafina," Victor whispered softly, his voice barely audible. She opened the door just a crack, enough for him to slip inside. His face was etched with concern, but his eyes were tired. He had been working all day, yet he still had enough energy to come to her, to check on her, even if only for a moment. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. His touch was warm, a rare comfort in a house that had become a prison. Serafina nodded, her lips pressed together in a forced smile. "I'm fine, Victor. Don't worry about me." But her heart wasn't fine. Not anymore. Her mind was racing, torn between the love she had for him and the resentment she felt for his inability to protect her from Matilda's cruelty. She longed for the affection they had shared when they first married, but those moments seemed like a distant memory now. "I wish I could do more for you," Victor continued, his voice tinged with guilt. "You deserve better than this. I know my mother is difficult, but I can't change her. I'm sorry." Serafina's gaze dropped to the floor as she clenched her fists. Her thoughts churned with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You're sorry, but it's not enough. It's never enough." Victor's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Serafina paused, taking a deep breath. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with frustration and hurt. "I've been patient, Victor. I've tried to be the perfect wife, but nothing I do is ever good enough for your mother. And you? You just stand by and let it happen." Victor's face paled, and he took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't know what to say. There was a part of him that knew she was right, but he couldn't bring himself to confront his mother. Matilda had always been the dominant force in their lives, and he had learned to keep his distance from the conflict. "I can't keep living like this," Serafina continued, her voice trembling. "I can't keep being your mother's punching bag. And I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." Victor looked at her, his expression torn. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. The realization hit him like a wave, the weight of his helplessness crashing down on him. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I love you, Serafina. But my mother? She's not someone I can stand up to. You know how she is." Serafina's gaze hardened. She knew what he was saying, and it stung. He had never been able to stand up to his mother, and it seemed that he never would. It was as though he had chosen her over Serafina from the very beginning, without even realizing it. "Well, maybe it's time I stand up for myself," Serafina said, her voice filled with determination. Victor opened his mouth to protest, but before he could say anything, Serafina held up her hand, silencing him. "I've put up with this long enough. I'm not going to take it anymore. You may not be able to change your mother, but I can change my own life." Victor's eyes widened in shock. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm not going to let your mother control me anymore," Serafina replied firmly. "I'm done being a doormat. I've already lost so much because of her, but I won't lose myself. I won't let her break me." For the first time in a long while, Serafina felt a sense of power surge within her. It was a feeling she had buried for too long, her sense of agency, her will to fight for herself. She wasn't going to let Matilda tear her apart anymore. It was time to take control of her own destiny, no matter the cost. Victor looked at her, a mix of worry and admiration in his eyes. "Serafina, please. Don't do something you'll regret." But Serafina's mind was made up. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm doing this for me, not for anyone else." With that, she turned away from him and walked toward the window, her heart pounding with resolve. The time had come. She didn't know what her next steps would be, but one thing was certain: she wasn't going to live in fear anymore. The days following that night were filled with a quiet intensity. Serafina's resolve had hardened, but the road ahead was far from easy. Each day, she could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders, but there was no turning back. Her eyes were opened now, and she could no longer pretend that the life she had been living was sustainable. Victor's hesitation lingered, but Serafina's mind was made up. The next morning, she woke up before the sun, her heart pounding with the promise of change. Matilda's voice rang in her ears from the previous day, berating her for every little thing she had done or hadn't done, but this time, it didn't have the same effect on her. She had made a choice, and it was time to take the first step. As she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. She had once been a timid girl, unsure of herself and the life she was expected to lead. But now, her reflection was that of a woman determined to break free from the chains that had bound her for far too long. Victor stirred in their bed, groggily pulling the blanket over his head as sunlight began to pour into the room. Serafina looked over at him, her heart tightening for a moment. She still loved him deeply, but she couldn't keep sacrificing herself for him nor for Matilda. She moved silently through the house, gathering her things. The plan she had set in motion was bold, perhaps even reckless, but the thought of living another day in silence, another day under Matilda's oppressive rule, was something she couldn't bear. She was done. As Serafina made her way down the stairs, she could hear Matilda's voice from the kitchen, loud and brash as always. "Serafina, where are you? I told you to clean the garden today. Are you planning on sitting around all day like you always do?" Serafina took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This would be the first real confrontation. It would set the tone for everything that followed. She couldn't afford to back down. With one final glance at Victor, still asleep, she pushed open the kitchen door. Matilda was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of soup, her back turned to Serafina. The moment Matilda heard the door creak open, she spun around, her eyes narrowing. "Ah, so now you decide to show up. I'm not sure why I bother. All I do is tell you what to do, and you..." "I'm done," Serafina said firmly, cutting her off before Matilda could finish her tirade. Matilda blinked, taken aback by the boldness in Serafina's voice. "What did you say?" "I'm done," Serafina repeated, her voice steady and clear. "I won't take your cruelty anymore. I've spent too many years living in this house, being treated like dirt. And I won't do it anymore." Matilda's face twisted with anger, her fists clenching at her sides. "You ungrateful little girl. Do you know who I am? I am your mother-in-law. You'll do what I say, or I'll make sure your life is even more miserable than it already is." Serafina felt her pulse quicken, but she stood her ground. "Not anymore, Matilda. I'm not afraid of you anymore." Matilda took a step forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can just walk out on me? After everything I've done for you? You think you can just get away with this? I don't want anything from you anymore," Serafina said, her voice shaking with a mix of defiance and frustration. "I don't want your approval, your pity, or your abuse. I want my life back. And I'll take it, with or without your consent." For a moment, there was silence. The tension between them was palpable, thick with years of resentment and unspoken words. Matilda opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was caught off guard, thrown off balance by the unexpected strength in Serafina's voice. Serafina didn't give her a chance to respond. Without another word, she turned on her heel and headed for the door. "I'm leaving, Matilda. I'll figure it out on my own. But I won't be staying here any longer." Matilda stood frozen, her face contorting with rage. "You'll regret this, Serafina. You think you can make it on your own. You'll be nothing without me." Serafina didn't look back. She knew that she was leaving behind everything: her life with Victor, the security of the home, the comfort of knowing where her next meal would come from, but she also knew that she couldn't live a lie anymore. She couldn't stay in a place that crushed her soul every single day. As she stepped outside, the cool morning air hit her like a wave, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lifting from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never be anyone's prisoner again. Victor awoke a few hours later, the sunlight streaming through the window, but Serafina was already gone. The bed next to him was empty, the covers untouched. He knew, in that moment, that she had made a choice. But whether that choice was for better or for worse, he didn't know. All he knew was that his life would never be the same again. Serafina walked out of the house, leaving behind the only life she had known for so many years. The weight of her decision hung heavy on her chest, but she felt an undeniable sense of freedom in her heart. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and there was no going back. She wasn't sure what awaited her beyond the threshold of the house, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was in control of her own fate. The morning sun was rising higher in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields as she walked down the familiar dirt road. The sound of her footsteps seemed louder than usual, echoing in her ears, but she didn't mind. For the first time, her steps were her own. Her heart was still heavy with the pain of leaving Victor behind, but she knew she couldn't stay. She had waited for him to stand up for her, to protect her from the relentless cruelty of his mother, but he never had. Now, he was just another obstacle in her path, a reminder of the life she could never have, the life she had been forced into by circumstance. She had loved him once, truly loved him. But love, she had learned, wasn't enough when it came to survival. She needed something more than affection. She needed independence. She needed to reclaim herself, and that meant cutting ties with everything that had held her back. As she walked further away from the house, she could feel her resolve strengthening. She wasn't just running away, she was taking control. The pain of the years spent in that house, the humiliation, the heartache, it would no longer define her. She would make her own way, build a life for herself from the ashes of what had been. After walking for hours, Serafina arrived at the edge of a small village. She hadn't planned on coming here, but something inside her urged her to keep going, to keep moving forward. The village was quiet, the streets lined with simple homes and shops. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a place where she could breathe without the constant shadow of Matilda's judgment looming over her. She wandered through the village, unsure of what to do next. She had no money, no plan, and no idea where to go. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let herself be swallowed by the uncertainty. She had to keep moving, keep pushing forward. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the village, Serafina found herself standing outside a modest inn. The sign above the door read "The Willow's Rest," and there was a faint light glowing from within. It was warm and inviting, and Serafina's stomach growled with hunger. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the thought of food made her feel a sense of relief, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She hesitated for a moment, her nerves flaring up as she wondered if she was making the right decision. But then, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth of the inn hit her like a wave. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air, and Serafina's mouth watered. The interior was cozy, with wooden tables and chairs scattered about, a fire crackling in the hearth. It was a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive atmosphere of the house she had just left behind. Behind the bar stood a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome, dear," she said as Serafina approached. "You look like you could use a hot meal. Sit down, I'll get you something to eat." Serafina nodded, her voice tight in her throat. "Thank you," she managed to say. The woman motioned to a table near the window. "Take a seat. I'll bring you some stew and bread. You look like you've had a long journey." Serafina sat down at the table, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding in until now. She felt a surge of emotion rise up in her chest, the overwhelming relief of finally being free, the exhaustion of the past few years, and the raw fear of the unknown. But most of all, she felt a sense of hope. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in ages, she felt like she could face it. The woman returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a loaf of fresh bread, placing them in front of Serafina with a smile. "Eat, dear. You'll feel better." Serafina nodded gratefully, her hands trembling as she picked up the spoon and took her first bite. The warmth of the food spread through her, soothing the hunger in her stomach and calming the storm of emotions inside her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she was alive, and that was enough. As she ate, she glanced around the inn. There were a few other patrons sitting at the tables, chatting quietly among themselves. They didn't seem to notice her, and that was just as well. She didn't want attention, she didn't want to be the center of anyone's curiosity. She just wanted to blend in, to find some peace, even if it was only for a little while. After finishing her meal, Serafina stood up and walked to the bar, where the woman was wiping down the counter. "Thank you," Serafina said quietly. "I really appreciate it." The woman smiled warmly. "You're welcome, dear. If you need a place to stay for the night, we've got a room upstairs. It's not much, but it'll do. And we don't turn anyone away here." Serafina hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to be a burden, but she knew she couldn't keep walking the streets all night. She was tired, physically and emotionally drained. A bed, even for just one night, sounded like a luxury she hadn't had in a long time. "I'll take the room," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman nodded and handed her a key. "Room 2, upstairs. It's quiet up there." Serafina thanked her again and made her way up the creaky staircase. The room was small but cozy, with a simple bed, a small dresser, and a window that overlooked the village. She closed the door behind her and sat down on the bed, the weight of the day finally crashing down on her. She had made it this far. She had left everything behind. But now, in this small, unfamiliar room, she felt both terrified and relieved. For the first time in years, Serafina allowed herself to cry. The tears came in waves, and she let them fall freely, not holding anything back. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer living in the shadow of someone else's control. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she would walk it on her own terms. As she lay in bed that night, her thoughts turned to Victor. She hadn't seen him since she left, and she didn't know if she ever would. Part of her still cared for him, but another part of her knew that their lives had already diverged too much for them to ever truly be together again. The love they once shared had been poisoned by the poison of Matilda's influence. She had given him everything, but in the end, it hadn't been enough. The next morning, Serafina woke early, her body stiff from the unfamiliar bed. But she didn't mind. She was ready to begin her new life. She didn't know where she was going yet, or what she would do, but she had her freedom. And that was all she needed to start over. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange. It was a new day for Serafina, one that she hoped would be different from all the others. The room in the inn was simple, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the oppressive walls she had just left behind. She was alone, but for the first time in ages, she didn't feel lonely. The silence here was different. It was peaceful, not suffocating. Serafina had spent the night tossing and turning, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She hadn't been able to sleep much, not after the enormity of her decision to leave everything behind. Yet, in the quiet moments before dawn, she had made a decision. She couldn't keep running from her past, but she could shape her future. The door to her room creaked open as Serafina stepped into the hallway. Her eyes wandered over the old wooden floorboards, and her heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and fear. She didn't know what awaited her in this strange village, but for the first time in years, she was in charge of her own destiny. The weight of her choices was heavy, but the thought of freedom was exhilarating. As she descended the stairs, the innkeeper greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, dear. You slept well, I hope." Serafina returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, thank you. It's been a while since I've had such a restful night." The innkeeper's expression softened with understanding. "I can see that. Sometimes, all we need is a change of scenery to find peace." Serafina nodded, her thoughts drifting back to her past. She could still hear Matilda's voice, the cruel words that had echoed in her mind for so long. But now, the sound of her own heartbeat drowned out the echoes of the past. The time had come to step forward, to find a life that was truly hers. "I was wondering," Serafina began, her voice tentative but steady, "do you know of any work around here?" I'm looking for something to keep myself busy, something to help me get started. The innkeeper's face brightened. Of course. There's a small bakery down the street, owned by a kind woman named Agnes. She's always looking for help. And there's also a stable just outside the village where they need extra hands. Both are good places to start. Serafina felt a surge of relief. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. Thank you. I'll visit them today. The innkeeper nodded, then added with a smile, and if you ever need a place to stay, don't hesitate to come back here. We don't turn people away. You'll always have a home here, if you want it. Serafina smiled gratefully. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. She stepped outside, the cool air kissing her cheeks as she made her way toward the bakery. The streets were bustling with life, the village alive with the sound of merchants calling out their wares, children laughing as they played in the dirt, and the faint murmur of townsfolk exchanging pleasantries. It was a far cry from the stifling atmosphere of her former home, where every word had been laced with judgment and fear. As she approached the bakery, the scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, pulling her in like a magnet. The small shop was quaint, with a wooden sign swinging gently above the door that read Agnes Bakery. Serafina pushed open the door, the bell above it jingling softly. Inside, the warmth of the oven and the sweet scent of pastries filled the space. A woman in her late 30s stood behind the counter, her hands covered in flour as she expertly kneaded dough. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her face was lined with the kind of warmth that made Serafina feel instantly at ease. Good morning. The woman greeted her with a cheerful smile. How can I help you? Serafina smiled back, feeling a flicker of hope. Hi, I'm Serafina. I'm new in town, and I was wondering if you might be looking for help around here. I'm willing to do anything: cleaning, baking, anything you need. The woman paused for a moment, eyeing Serafina curiously. Then, her expression softened. I could always use an extra pair of hands. We're a small shop, but we keep busy. You're welcome to start today if you'd like. Serafina's heart swelled with gratitude. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Agnes led her to the back of the bakery, where Serafina began helping with various tasks. Kneading dough, cleaning the counters, and arranging the pastries. The work was hard, but it felt good. It felt right. With each task she completed, she felt herself shedding the weight of her past, piece by piece. As the hours passed, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the bakery. Serafina felt a sense of satisfaction as she stood behind the counter, watching customers come in and out, greeting them with a smile, offering them fresh bread and pastries. Around noon, Agnes took a break and sat down with Serafina. You're doing well, Serafina. I'm glad to have you here. Serafina smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Thank you, Agnes. It feels good to be useful again. I've been away from work for so long, I forgot how much I missed it." Agnes nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, the hardest part is just getting started. You've got the right spirit, though. You'll do well here." As they chatted, Serafina began to feel a sense of belonging, something she hadn't felt in years. Agnes wasn't just her employer, she was kind and understanding, a woman who recognized the value of hard work and the importance of a second chance. After a few more hours of work, the day was winding down, and Serafina felt a sense of accomplishment. The bakery had been busy, and it had felt good to be part of something so simple, so grounded. As she was preparing to leave, Agnes stopped her. "You know," Agnes said, "I can tell there's something more to you than meets the eye. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Serafina hesitated, unsure of how much she should reveal. "I've been through things," she said softly. "But I'm trying to move forward." Agnes gave her a knowing look. "Everyone has a story. But it's the ones who choose to move forward that make it out the other side stronger." Serafina smiled, grateful for the kind words. "Thank you, Agnes. I'll be back tomorrow." As Serafina walked back to the inn, the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. She felt a sense of peace settle over her as she walked through the village, her footsteps light. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The journey ahead would be long, but for the first time, she felt hopeful. She had taken the first step toward rebuilding her life, and she wasn't going to stop now. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Serafina's life seemed to fall into a new rhythm. She woke up early, worked at Agnes' bakery, and spent her evenings alone, reflecting on the journey she had embarked upon. The village had become her new home, and though she didn't know what the future held, she could feel the weight of her past slowly lifting from her shoulders. The bakery work was grueling, but Serafina was used to hard labor. Agnes had been a kind employer, always offering encouragement and a warm meal at the end of the day. The bakery was a small business, but it had its loyal customers, and Serafina found a sense of pride in her work. For the first time in years, she had control over something in her life. The bread she baked, the pastries she prepared, they were hers. She could no longer rely on others to shape her destiny. But as she worked, something gnawed at her, the nagging feeling that she was still bound to the life she had left behind. She had escaped Matilda's oppressive grip, but there were still remnants of the past that clung to her, lingering in the corners of her mind. Victor. The love they had shared. The broken dreams. One evening, as she sat in her small room at the inn, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. There stood Victor, standing in the dim light of the hallway, his face tired and worn. "Victor," Serafina whispered, her voice catching. She hadn't seen him since she left, and the sight of him stirred a storm of emotions within her. "Serafina," Victor said, his voice hoarse. "I've been looking for you. I need to talk to you." Serafina's heart sank. She had known this moment would come, but she hadn't been prepared for it. She stepped aside to let him in, her mind racing. She had thought she was done with him, done with the life they had shared, done with the pain, but here he was, standing in front of her, looking as lost as she had felt for so long. Victor entered the room, his eyes scanning the simple space before settling on Serafina. "I've been thinking about you every day," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know how to fix things, but I can't just let you go. I can't live with the thought of losing you." Serafina's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, to tell him how much he had hurt her, how much his silence had broken her, but she couldn't. Instead, she just stood there, staring at him, her heart caught between the love she once felt for him and the anger that had been building up inside her. "Victor," Serafina said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "you never stood up for me. You let your mother control everything. I couldn't live like that anymore." Victor's face crumpled with guilt. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stand up to her. You know how she is. But I love you, Serafina. I always have." Tears welled in Serafina's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "Love isn't enough, Victor. It never was. You never protected me. You never saw me as your equal. I was always just your mother's problem to deal with." Victor reached for her hand, his grip desperate. "Please, Serafina, don't say that. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But I want to fix things. I want to be with you. I want to make it right." Serafina pulled her hand away, her heart aching at the raw sincerity in his voice. But she couldn't let herself fall back into the same patterns. She had made a choice, and that choice was to move forward. To live for herself, not for him, not for Matilda. "I'm not the same person I was when I married you," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I've changed. And I can't go back." Victor's face faltered, the weight of her words sinking in. "Serafina, please. I'm begging you. Don't leave me like this." Serafina felt a pang of sorrow, but she steeled herself. "I already left, Victor. You just didn't realize it until now." For a moment, there was silence between them, the room heavy with unspoken words. Victor stared at her, his face a mixture of heartbreak and confusion, while Serafina tried to steady her breath, her heart aching but resolute. "I have to go," Serafina said, her voice breaking the silence. "I have to keep going, for me. I can't keep living in the past. I've spent so long being afraid of what would happen if I left, but now that I've done it, I see that it's the only way I can be free. Victor stood motionless for a long moment, then sighed deeply. I can't change the past, but I still love you, Serafina. I always will. Serafina gave him a small, sad smile. I know. But sometimes love isn't enough to fix everything. I've learned that the hard way. She turned away from him, moving toward the door. Goodbye, Victor. And with that, she stepped out of the room, leaving the man she once loved behind. Serafina's heart was heavy as she walked through the village streets that night. She had made her choice, and yet the weight of it felt almost unbearable. But it was a weight she had to carry if she was ever going to find peace. As the days passed, Serafina threw herself into her work, finding solace in the rhythm of kneading dough, cleaning, and baking. The simple tasks helped her clear her mind, but her heart still ached with the remnants of her old life. Victor's face haunted her in quiet moments, and the memory of her past continued to linger, like a shadow that she couldn't outrun. But with each day that passed, Serafina felt herself growing stronger. She had chosen this life for herself, and it was a life she could build with her own hands. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she could see the possibilities. She was no longer defined by the choices of others. She was her own person, free to make her own destiny. And then, one fateful morning, as Serafina worked in the bakery, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was Matilda. Serafina's breath caught in her throat as she looked up. Her mother-in-law stood in the doorway, her eyes cold and calculating as always. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching Serafina as if she were a stranger. You think you can run away from me? Matilda's voice was low, dripping with venom. You think you can just walk away and start a new life, without any consequences? Serafina stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. But then the fire within her flared again, the same fire that had sparked when she left Victor. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to let Matilda intimidate her. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Matilda, Serafina said, her voice steady. I've made my choice, and I won't go back. You can't control me anymore. Matilda's eyes narrowed, and a twisted smile crept onto her face. You think you can just walk away and live your life? You're nothing without me, Serafina. You'll see. But Serafina didn't back down. I'll see. No, Matilda. You will see. You can't break me anymore. I'm done. Matilda's smile faded, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. She turned to leave, but not before throwing one final, venomous look at Serafina. We'll see how long you last without me. Serafina watched her go, her heart pounding in her chest. But this time, she wasn't scared. She was free. The days that followed Serafina's confrontation with Matilda were filled with a strange quietness. It was as if a new chapter in her life had begun, one where she didn't feel the constant sting of criticism and control. Yet, while the weight of Matilda's influence had lifted, there was still a lingering tension in the air. The village had become a refuge, but Serafina knew that the calm would be temporary. Matilda had made her threats, and Serafina had no doubt that she would stop at nothing to make her regret her decision. Work at the bakery had become Serafina's new world. Agnes, the bakery owner, had noticed the change in her from the first day she walked in. Serafina was more focused, more present. She worked tirelessly, her hands moving with practiced ease, preparing dough, shaping pastries, and serving customers with a smile that had started to feel genuine. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Agnes looked at Serafina with a soft smile. "You're doing well, Serafina. I can see it in you, the strength, the resolve. You're becoming a part of this place, aren't you?" Serafina paused in her work and looked up. Her hands were flour-covered, and the heat of the oven made the room warm and comforting. "I guess so. It feels different here, you know. In a good way." She wiped her hands on her apron, her thoughts drifting. "I think I'm finally starting to feel like I belong." Agnes studied her for a moment, her eyes kind but knowing. "Belonging isn't always about where you are, it's about who you are when you're there. I think you've found a piece of yourself, Serafina." Serafina smiled, her heart swelling at the compliment. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. For the first time in so long, she felt a spark of something close to hope. She had come so far from the frightened girl who had arrived in the village just weeks ago. But deep down, something still gnawed at her, an unease that refused to fade. Late that night, after the bakery had closed and the village had quieted down, Serafina sat by the window in her small room at the inn. She gazed out at the moonlit landscape, her thoughts drifting back to the life she had left behind. She had made the right choice, she told herself. But still, her heart ached with a hollow feeling, as though something was missing. She had left behind a man she had once loved. And though their love had been poisoned by the toxicity of his family, it still stung to think of him. Then, a knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood up quickly, her pulse quickening. Could it be? Serafina opened the door cautiously, and standing before her was Victor. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. The sight of him took her breath away, but she quickly masked her emotions. "Victor," she said softly, almost surprised by the calmness in her own voice. "I had to see you," Victor said, his voice shaky. "I couldn't stay away, Serafina. I've been thinking about what you said, about everything. And I know I've been a coward, but I can't let you go. I won't let you go." Serafina took a step back, her heart twisting with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Victor, I've already told you. I've made my choice. I can't go back. I can't keep living the way we were living. Victor's eyes filled with desperation. I know. But you're right. I let my mother control everything, and I didn't stand up for you. I was wrong. I love you, Serafina. I can't live without you. Serafina shook her head, her throat tightening. You don't get it, Victor. It's not just about love anymore. It's about freedom. It's about standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I have a chance to live for me, not for anyone else. Victor stepped closer, reaching for her hand, his voice pleading. Please, Serafina. I'll change. I swear I will. I'll do whatever it takes. Just come back with me. We can make things right. We can have a life together. Her chest tightened, the pain of their past welling up inside her. She had loved him once, but the person standing before her now was a shadow of the man she had married. The man she had trusted to stand by her had failed her in the most important way. I can't, Victor, she whispered, pulling her hand away. I need to do this for myself. I can't keep waiting for things to change when they never will. You've made your choices, and I've made mine. Victor's face fell, the light in his eyes dimming. So, this is it? He asked softly. You're really going to leave me behind? Serafina's heart broke, but she knew she had to stay strong. Yes, Victor. I'm leaving behind that life. I can't keep living in fear, waiting for your mother to dictate my every move. I'm not going to be anyone's puppet anymore. Victor stood there for a moment, his face crumpling as if the weight of her words had broken something inside him. He opened his mouth to say something more, but no words came. Instead, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the quiet of the night. Serafina stood in the doorway, watching him go. The pain of seeing him leave was almost unbearable, but she couldn't let herself be swayed. She had made her decision. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't living for anyone else anymore. She was living for herself. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. Serafina threw herself into her work at the bakery, her hands moving mechanically as she prepared bread, pastries, and pies. But her mind was elsewhere, her thoughts constantly returning to Victor and what she had left behind. She knew it was for the best, but part of her couldn't help but wonder if there was still a chance for them, if there was still hope. But deep down, Serafina knew that there were no easy answers. The life she had once imagined with Victor was gone, and she had to learn to accept that. There was no turning back. She could only move forward, one step at a time. And then, one afternoon, as Serafina was cleaning the counter after a busy morning, Agnes came up to her with a small envelope in her hand. "This came for you," she said, handing it over with a curious glance. "It's addressed to you." Serafina took the envelope, her heart racing as she recognized the familiar handwriting on the front. Victor. She hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling slightly as she tore open the seal. Inside was a letter, written in the same shaky handwriting that had once filled her with warmth. But now, as she read the words, they felt hollow. Serafina. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't let you go without telling you how much I love you. I've failed you in ways I can never undo, but I'm not giving up on us. If you ever decide to come back, if you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be waiting for you. Please, don't leave me like this. You're the love of my life. I'll always love you. Victor. Serafina let the letter fall from her hands, her chest tight as a flood of emotions washed over her. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him everything she felt, but for the first time, she realized that she had no answers. The love they had shared had been beautiful, but it was no longer enough. She folded the letter carefully and placed it on the counter. She couldn't go back to that life. Not now. Not ever. As she stood there, her thoughts drifted to the future. It was uncertain, filled with challenges and unknowns, but one thing was clear, she was no longer waiting for someone else to save her. She was saving herself. The morning after receiving Victor's letter, Serafina sat in her small room at the inn, staring at the piece of paper. She had read his words over and over again, each time feeling the familiar pang of pain, but also a sense of relief. His confession, his promise to wait for her, had stirred something inside her. But it wasn't the yearning she had once felt. Instead, there was a deep knowing within her that the life she had been living, the life tied to Victor, Matilda, and the walls that had confined her, was a life she could never return to. She folded the letter carefully, tucking it away in the drawer beside her bed. She would keep it as a reminder of the past, but she would not let it define her future. That chapter was closed. And as painful as it was, she could no longer live in the shadows of a love that had never truly been hers to claim. The village was calm this morning. The hustle and bustle of daily life had already begun, and Serafina's thoughts turned to the bakery. She had come so far, and though she had yet to fully understand the path she was walking, she knew one thing: she couldn't let herself be consumed by the past any longer. As she made her way to the bakery, she felt a flicker of something inside her, something she hadn't felt in years: hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she had the power to choose it. She wasn't trapped anymore. Agnes was already busy when Serafina arrived, kneading dough at the back of the bakery. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, and Serafina felt the familiar warmth of the place wash over her. It was a comfort she had grown to cherish, a small piece of peace in the whirlwind of her new life. "Morning," Serafina said as she approached. Agnes looked up, smiling warmly. "Good morning, dear. You're early today." "I couldn't sleep much," Serafina replied, her voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything." Agnes paused in her work, setting the dough aside for a moment. You're a woman with a lot on her mind. I can tell. You've been through a lot, Serafina. Serafina nodded, not sure how to express the mixture of emotions swirling inside her. I have. But I think I'm finally ready to move on. To stop letting my past hold me back. Agnes studied her for a moment before responding. You've come a long way, Serafina. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Serafina smiled faintly. I'm starting to believe that. The bakery filled with the comforting sound of Agnes at work, and Serafina helped, finding solace in the rhythm of the tasks. Kneading dough, shaping pastries, and cleaning the counter. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work. And for the first time, it felt like the kind of life she had always wanted. One built on her own terms. By the time the sun began to set, Serafina had finished her shift at the bakery and was walking back to the inn, a basket of fresh bread in her hands. She felt a quiet satisfaction in the simplicity of her new life, but there was still a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. What would happen now? Would she stay here in this small village, working day by day, or would she find something more? She had no answers, but she knew she couldn't go back. The person she had been, the woman trapped in a life defined by the expectations of others, was gone. As she neared the inn, she saw a figure standing in the doorway. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Victor again. He stood there, his posture slumped, as if the weight of his own regrets had become too much to bear. When he saw her, he took a step forward, his eyes desperate. Serafina, he said softly, his voice hoarse. I had to come back. I couldn't just let you go. I know I've hurt you, but please, don't shut me out. Let me prove that I can be the man you need me to be. Serafina felt the familiar ache in her chest, but she pushed it down. She couldn't afford to go down this road again. Not with him. Not with the version of him that had chosen his mother over her. She had already made her choice, and no matter how much she loved him, she couldn't go back to the life they had once shared. I've already made my choice, Victor, she said, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. I can't keep living in the past. I can't keep waiting for you to change when you haven't shown me you're willing to. Victor's face crumpled, the weight of her words sinking in. You really mean that, don't you? You're really leaving it all behind. Serafina nodded, tears welling in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I have to, Victor. I'm sorry, but I have to live for myself now. I can't keep holding on to something that's already broken. For a long moment, there was silence between them. Victor stood there, his eyes full of unshed tears, while Serafina felt the finality of her decision settle over her like a heavy cloak. I won't stop loving you, Victor said quietly, his voice breaking. Serafina took a deep breath, the words coming slowly. I know. But love isn't enough anymore. It never was. She turned away from him, her heart aching, but resolute. As she stepped inside the inn, she closed the door behind her, leaving Victor standing in the darkening evening. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she was free now. Free to live her life on her own terms. The next few days passed in a blur. The bakery's work kept Serafina busy, and Agnes became a comforting presence in her life. The villagers were friendly, but Serafina kept to herself. She didn't want anyone to pity her or ask too many questions. She was rebuilding her life from the ground up, and she didn't need anyone's help. But as she walked through the village one morning, she felt a strange sensation, a pull in the pit of her stomach. She had learned to trust her instincts, and something told her that her past wasn't finished with her yet. Something was about to change. She didn't know what it was or when it would happen, but she had the uneasy feeling that Matilda's influence wasn't done with her. The woman had always been a force of control, and Serafina had no doubt that she wouldn't let go so easily. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw a figure standing at the edge of the village, watching her. It was a man, tall and cloaked in shadows. As Serafina's eyes met his, a chill ran down her spine. She didn't recognize him, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood there, just watching her. She quickened her pace, trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong. But no matter how fast she walked, the sensation of being watched didn't leave. It clung to her like a shadow, and the only thing she could do was keep moving forward. The following week dawned with a sense of unease hanging in the air. Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something she wasn't quite ready for. She had been working at the bakery every day, finding comfort in the routine, but the sense of being watched still lingered. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of leaves in the wind, seemed to make her tense up. Something, or someone, was out there, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. That morning, as she walked to the bakery, the village felt different. It was quieter than usual, and the air seemed thick with an unspoken tension. Serafina tried to push it out of her mind, but the feeling wouldn't go away. She quickened her pace, the familiar path to the bakery stretching before her like a lifeline. When she arrived, Agnes was already there, busy at work as usual. The old woman gave Serafina a warm smile, but even she seemed a bit off. "Good morning, dear," Agnes said, her voice a little softer than usual. "You seem distracted." Serafina forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I'm just tired, I suppose. A little overwhelmed." Agnes raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Instead, she busied herself with the morning preparations, kneading dough, and arranging pastries for the day's customers. But Serafina could sense that something was amiss. Agnes had been a mother figure to her in many ways, and Serafina trusted her instincts. As the day went on, the tension only seemed to grow. Serafina noticed that the village felt quieter, the usual chatter of the marketplace muted. There were fewer people walking the streets, fewer faces in the crowd. Even the bakery, which usually had a steady stream of customers, seemed slower than usual. The change was subtle, but it was enough to make Serafina's nerves flare up again. It wasn't until late afternoon that the feeling of unease finally culminated. Serafina had just finished wiping down the counter when the door to the bakery creaked open. A figure stepped inside, cloaked in shadows. The air seemed to grow colder as the man entered, and Serafina's heart skipped a beat. She froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. The man was tall, with dark hair and a weathered face. His eyes were intense, studying her as if he were looking through her. He was dressed in a long, dark coat, and there was an air of authority about him, something that made Serafina instinctively take a step back. "Excuse me," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "Is this the bakery run by Agnes?" Serafina nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" The man's eyes flickered with something. Was it recognition? He seemed to study her for a long moment, and the silence between them stretched unnervingly. "I'm here on business," he said finally. "I need to speak with Agnes. Is she around?" Agnes, who had been working quietly in the back, emerged at the sound of her name. She looked up at the man, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she recognized him. "Yes. How can I help you?" The man's face softened slightly, but the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "A woman named Serafina. I've heard she's working here." Serafina's stomach dropped. The man's gaze shifted toward her, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to still. How did he know her name? Who was this man, and why was he looking for her? "I'm Serafina," she said, her voice trembling despite her attempt to remain calm. "What is this about?" The man's lips twisted into a faint smile. "It's about your past," he said. "And the consequences of your choices." Agnes, sensing the change in the air, stepped forward. "What do you want with her?" she demanded, her tone sharper than usual. The man's gaze flickered briefly to Agnes, then back to Serafina. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice steady but cold. "But you've made enemies. People are looking for you, Serafina. They won't stop until they find you." Serafina's heart pounded in her chest. "Who's looking for me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What have I done?" The man paused for a moment, his gaze flicking toward the window as if to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Matilda," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "She hasn't forgotten you. She won't rest until she gets what she wants." Serafina's blood ran cold at the mention of Matilda's name. She had known, deep down, that there was no escaping her past. Matilda had always been a force of control, a presence that loomed over everything Serafina had ever done. but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing the certainty in this man's voice, made the reality of the situation hit her harder than she had expected. "You're telling me Matilda sent you?" Serafina asked, her voice trembling. "To come after me?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Not exactly. But she's not far behind. You can keep running, Serafina. But you need to understand something, you can't escape her forever." Serafina took a step back, her mind racing. This was it. The past that she had thought she had left behind had found its way back into her life. Matilda's reach had extended even here, into the quiet village that had given her a sense of safety. "You have to leave, Serafina," the man said, his voice firm. "Matilda has people everywhere. She won't stop until she finds you. And when she does, there will be consequences." For the first time since leaving her old life behind, Serafina felt fear, true, bone-deep fear. The life she had built for herself here was in jeopardy. Matilda wasn't done with her, and the man in front of her had made that crystal clear. Serafina's gaze flickered toward Agnes, who was standing off to the side, her expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken since the man had arrived, but Serafina could sense the tension in the air, like a storm waiting to break. "Who are you?" Serafina asked the man again, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Why are you telling me this?" The man's lips curled into a thin smile. "I'm someone who's been keeping an eye on you," he said cryptically. "And I'm giving you a warning. Matilda won't rest until she has what she wants. And right now, that's you." With that, the man turned and left the bakery, leaving Serafina standing there, her heart racing in her chest. Agnes looked at her with a worried expression, her voice soft but firm. "Who was that?" Agnes asked. "What did he mean?" "What's going on, Serafina?" Serafina swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't know, Agnes. But I think I'm being hunted." The days following the mysterious visit from the man were filled with an eerie sense of dread. Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was as if Matilda's presence was hanging over her like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. Despite her efforts to focus on her work at the bakery, the constant gnawing anxiety in her chest wouldn't fade. Every glance over her shoulder, every creak of the floorboards at the inn, made her heart race. That evening, as the sun set over the quiet village, Serafina found herself unable to sit still. She had grown used to the simple routines of the bakery, the calming rhythm of kneading dough and preparing pastries, but tonight, everything felt different. The bakery seemed quieter than usual, the warm golden glow from the oven casting long shadows across the room. Agnes had already gone home for the evening, leaving Serafina alone in the fading light. Serafina's thoughts returned to the man who had come to warn her. He had spoken of Matilda in a way that sent chills down her spine. He had called her someone with power, but Serafina didn't know whether he had meant Matilda's wealth or her cold, unyielding nature. All she knew was that the woman who had controlled her life for so long was not going to let her go easily. And that scared her more than anything else. She had to leave. She couldn't stay here in the village, knowing that Matilda was out there, looking for her. But where would she go? What would she do? For the first time since her escape, Serafina felt lost. As she stood up from the counter, a sudden knocking at the door startled her. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could that be at this hour? She cautiously approached the door, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The village was usually quiet by now, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She had hoped for a few moments of solitude, but it seemed that wasn't meant to be. When she opened the door, she froze. Standing there was a woman, dressed in a dark cloak with a hood that obscured her face. She was tall and slender, but there was something about her presence that felt wrong. The woman's eyes glinted from beneath her hood, her gaze sharp and calculating. "Can I help you?" Serafina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped forward, her movement graceful and fluid. "You're Serafina, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low and smooth. "The one who escaped Matilda's grasp." Serafina's pulse quickened. She felt a cold chill rush over her. The woman's voice sent a shiver down her spine. "Who are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled despite her best efforts to remain calm. The woman smiled, though it was more of a knowing smirk than a friendly expression. "You don't need to know my name. But I know yours, Serafina. I've been watching you." Serafina's heart raced. The words "watching you" echoed in her mind, and a cold wave of fear swept over her. "What do you want from me?" The woman tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she regarded Serafina. "I've been sent to deliver a message. Matilda has found you. She doesn't take kindly to people leaving her side. Especially not her own flesh and blood." Serafina's mind spun. "I left her because of what she did to me," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm not going back to her. I don't care what she does." The woman's smile widened. "You don't have a choice. Matilda doesn't let anyone leave without consequences. And she's not going to let you slip away so easily." Serafina stood her ground, though fear was crawling up her spine. "I won't go back," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I've made my choice. I'm not afraid of her." The woman took a step forward, her movements slow and deliberate. "You should be," she said softly, her voice laced with a venomous sweetness. "Because the consequences of defying Matilda are far worse than anything you can imagine." Serafina's breath caught in her throat. What did the woman mean by that? What could Matilda possibly do to her? The memories of the abuse she had endured at Matilda's hands, the years of manipulation and control, surged forward in Serafina's mind, reminding her of the darkness that had once been her life. The woman's eyes flickered with something like amusement. "Don't worry," she said, her voice almost pitying. "You'll soon learn that you can't escape Matilda. She always gets what she wants." Serafina's mind raced. She had to think quickly. She couldn't let this woman, whoever she was, intimidate her. But what could she do? She had no allies here. Agnes didn't know the full extent of Serafina's past, and the villagers were nothing more than strangers. She had built a life for herself here, but it felt fragile. "I don't care what you think," Serafina said, her voice trembling but defiant. "I'm not going back." The woman raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by Serafina's resolve. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But bravery won't save you from Matilda's reach. She's already sent someone to find you." Serafina's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You're being hunted," the woman said with a smirk. "And no one can escape Matilda when she sets her mind to something." With those words, the woman turned and walked away, leaving Serafina standing in the doorway, her mind reeling. The weight of the situation crashed down on her all at once. Matilda had sent someone to track her down. The consequences she had feared were coming. Serafina stepped back into the room, the fear rising like a storm inside her. She had to leave now. She couldn't stay here, knowing that Matilda's influence had already reached this far. But where could she go? Who could she trust? The next few days passed in a blur for Serafina. She couldn't focus on her work at the bakery, her mind consumed with the looming threat of Matilda. She had heard rumors of people in the village whispering behind her back, their voices filled with suspicion and curiosity. The mysterious woman's warning echoed in her mind, and she knew that she couldn't stay hidden forever. Agnes noticed the change in her. "You've been distant, Serafina. What's going on? You seem unsettled." Serafina looked up, meeting Agnes' concerned gaze. "Matilda's found me. She's sending people after me. I don't know what to do." Agnes' expression softened. She reached across the counter, placing a gentle hand over Serafina's. "You're not alone, Serafina. You've found a place here. And you'll have my help, if you need it. But you can't keep running forever. You have to face this." Serafina swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "I'm scared, Agnes. What if she comes for me? What if I can't outrun her?" Agnes gave her a reassuring smile. "You've already outrun her once, Serafina. You can do it again. But you need to decide what kind of life you want. You can't keep looking over your shoulder forever." Serafina nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Agnes' words sink in. She had to make a choice. She couldn't keep running. The time had come to confront her past once and for all. The weeks that followed the warning from the mysterious woman were fraught with fear and uncertainty. Serafina's life, which had begun to settle into a rhythm of peace and quiet, was slowly unraveling. Each time she walked through the village, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. It wasn't just the lingering sense of paranoia, it was the very real knowledge that Matilda's reach had not been severed, no matter how far Serafina had run. Her work at the bakery had become her only solace, the kneading of dough, the shaping of loaves, and the careful arrangement of pastries providing a temporary distraction from the storm brewing in her mind. Agnes noticed her growing restlessness, but Serafina couldn't bring herself to voice her fears. She couldn't burden the woman who had become so kind to her with the weight of her past. Agnes had given her a safe haven, and Serafina wasn't sure how to explain that safety was a fleeting illusion when your past was constantly chasing you. It was late one evening when the calm facade she had carefully built was shattered. She had just closed the bakery for the night and was walking back to the inn, her mind heavy with thoughts of what the mysterious woman had said. She was almost at the door of her room when a voice stopped her in her tracks. Serafina. She froze. Her heart leaped into her throat as she turned to face the figure that had spoken her name. It was him, the man who had come to warn her. But now, standing in the dim light of the evening, he was not alone. Two others, both cloaked in dark shadows, stood behind him. Their presence made the air feel heavier, more oppressive. Serafina instinctively took a step back, her breath catching in her chest. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling calm. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here because you need to understand something." He motioned to the two figures behind him. "They've been sent by Matilda. She wants you back. She's very determined." Serafina's pulse quickened, the words sinking into her like a knife. "I'm not going back," she said firmly, though doubt crept into her voice. "I won't." The man regarded her with an almost pitying look. "You think you can outrun her forever? You've already made her angry. You don't understand, Serafina. Matilda doesn't let things go. She's made an example out of others before. And she'll do it again." Serafina's mind raced. "What do you mean, make an example? What are you going to do to me?" The man didn't immediately answer. Instead, one of the figures behind him moved forward, a tall, imposing man whose eyes glinted with coldness. He said nothing as he passed the man, stepping toward Serafina. His presence was suffocating, and Serafina's chest tightened. She had seen that kind of menace before, the kind that comes with a mission to see something through, no matter the cost. "I don't want any trouble," Serafina said quickly, her voice wavering. "Just leave me alone." The tall figure halted just a few feet from her, his eyes narrowing. "It's too late for that," he said in a low growl. "Matilda doesn't leave loose ends." Serafina took another step back, her thoughts racing. What did he mean by that? Was Matilda capable of going this far to track her down? "Don't worry," the man said, sensing her fear. "We're not here to hurt you. Not yet, anyway. Matilda wants you to come back. She doesn't want you running off to make a life for yourself. And she has the means to make sure you don't." Serafina's thoughts flitted to the bakery, to Agnes, to the life she had begun to build for herself. Would it all be taken away from her now? She hadn't expected Matilda's vengeance to follow her here, but it seemed inevitable now. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why won't she just let me go?" The man's face softened for a moment, as if considering her question. "Because Matilda doesn't let go of what she owns. She believes you belong to her, Serafina. And she'll stop at nothing to bring you back." The words sent a shiver through Serafina's body. She couldn't go back. She had come so far, fought so hard for her freedom. She wasn't going to let Matilda take it all away now. "I won't go back to her," Serafina said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I don't care what you say. I won't." The man's eyes narrowed. "That's your choice," he said softly. "But know this. Matilda will find you. And when she does, you won't be able to run anymore." Serafina's chest tightened. The man's words rang in her ears, and she realized, with a cold jolt of fear, that Matilda's pursuit wasn't just a matter of her safety. It was a matter of survival. The man turned to the others, and without another word, they started to leave. As they walked away, Serafina stood frozen, her body trembling. The weight of their threat hung heavily in the air, and as they disappeared into the darkness, she felt as though a part of her life had been ripped away. She was alone. Again. And she couldn't escape the feeling that Matilda's reach was closer than ever. Serafina couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her small room at the inn, her mind racing with thoughts of Matilda and the mysterious man's warning. What had she gotten herself into? Had she really thought she could escape this life? The bakery, once a safe haven, now felt like a cage. Every customer, every familiar face, seemed to whisper with suspicion in her ears. Was she safe here? Was there anywhere she could go that Matilda's reach wouldn't find her? As the first light of dawn filtered through the window, Serafina gave up on sleep. She dressed quickly and made her way to the bakery, hoping that the work would help quiet her mind. But deep down, she knew she couldn't outrun this. She couldn't hide forever. When she arrived at the bakery, she found Agnes already there, kneading dough with practiced hands. But there was a difference today. Agnes looked up at Serafina with concern in her eyes, and Serafina realized that the older woman knew something was wrong. "Serafina," Agnes said softly, her voice laced with the gentle warmth that Serafina had come to rely on. "What's going on? You've been distant. What happened?" Serafina opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth was, she didn't know what to say. How could she explain the danger that was following her, the fear that had crept back into her life like a shadow? "I'm in trouble," Serafina said finally, her voice shaking. "Matilda won't leave me alone. She's sent people after me." Agnes set the dough aside and moved toward Serafina, her expression soft with concern. "Matilda? That woman from your past?" Serafina nodded, the weight of the name hanging between them like a dark cloud. "She's not going to stop until she finds me. And when she does," Serafina swallowed hard. "I don't know what she'll do." Agnes stepped forward and placed a comforting hand on Serafina's shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone, Serafina. Whatever happens, I'm here for you." Serafina's eyes welled with tears at the kindness in Agnes' voice. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I don't know how to fight her. I'm afraid that no matter what I do, she'll find me. She always does." Agnes' gaze was firm, and she squeezed Serafina's shoulder reassuringly. "Then you'll make your stand here, right here. You're not running anymore. You've found a new life, Serafina. And no one, not even Matilda, can take that from you." Serafina felt a surge of something deep within her, something that felt like hope, even if only for a moment. She wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to give her the strength to face whatever was coming. The days after the warning from the man and the ominous visit from Matilda's people felt like a storm was gathering on the horizon. Serafina had never felt more alone, yet at the same time, a strange sense of purpose began to take root inside her. She had spent so long running, hiding, and pretending to be someone she wasn't that it was hard to imagine any other way of life. But now, faced with the undeniable truth that Matilda would stop at nothing to get her back, Serafina realized that she could no longer live in fear. She had to choose: fight or flee, face her past or let it consume her. The mornings had been spent at the bakery, each loaf of bread she baked offering a small moment of peace. But even there, she couldn't escape the sense of impending danger. Every knock on the door, every shadow that passed by, made her heart race with the thought that Matilda's agents were closing in. It was only a matter of time before they would come for her again, and Serafina couldn't live in constant terror. One afternoon, as she walked down the quiet village street, a familiar figure caught her eye. Agnes was standing in front of her bakery, talking to a man. Serafina's heart skipped a beat when she recognized him. It was the same man who had come to warn her, the one who had spoken of Matilda's relentless pursuit. But today, something was different. The man looked different. He no longer had the cold, threatening air that had surrounded him before. Instead, He seemed almost apologetic, his shoulders slumped as if weighed down by something unseen. "Serafina," Agnes called as she spotted her approaching. "This man wants to speak with you." The man turned, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, Serafina just stared at him, unsure of what to feel. Was he here to threaten her again? Or was there more to this story than she realized? "Why are you here?" Serafina asked, her voice steady but wary. "What do you want from me now?" The man hesitated, glancing at Agnes before returning his gaze to Serafina. "I've made a mistake," he said quietly. "I was sent to bring you back to Matilda. But I see now that what she wants isn't what's best for you." Serafina's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I've already made my choice. I'm not going back to her." The man's shoulders slumped even more. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I should never have tried to bring you back. I've seen what Matilda does to people. She doesn't care about anyone but herself. But I was just following orders. I thought I was helping." Serafina's heart twisted in her chest. She had seen enough of Matilda's cruelty to know that the woman was capable of anything. But hearing the man's confession, seeing the regret in his eyes, brought an unexpected wave of compassion over her. For the first time, she saw him not as an enemy, but as someone who was also caught in Matilda's web, just like she had been. "You don't have to do this anymore," Serafina said softly, her voice filled with empathy. "You don't have to follow her orders. You're not a slave to her, just like I wasn't." The man's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to stop. I've been under her control for so long that I don't know how to get out." Serafina took a step forward, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "You start by making a choice. You choose your own path. You don't have to let her control you anymore." For the first time, the man looked hopeful. "But what if she comes for me, too?" Serafina looked into his eyes and smiled. "Then we face her together." The days that followed were filled with planning. Serafina knew that if she was going to confront Matilda, she couldn't do it alone. Agnes had offered her full support, as had the people in the village who had slowly come to understand her story. It was a humbling experience, and Serafina realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She had built connections, friends who were willing to stand by her side. The bakery became the meeting place for those willing to help, and as Serafina and the man whose name, she had learned, was Thomas made plans, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just preparing for battle. They were preparing for a future where they wouldn't live in fear any longer. One evening, as the sun began to set, the final preparations were in place. The plan was simple but dangerous. Serafina, Thomas, and a small group of trusted villagers would confront Matilda. They would take away her power, expose her for the tyrant she was, and free themselves once and for all. But Serafina's heart still ached with uncertainty. Was this the right decision? Could they really defeat someone as powerful and ruthless as Matilda? And if they did, would they be able to live with the consequences of their actions? She couldn't answer all of these questions. But she knew one thing for sure: the only way forward was to face Matilda head-on. She couldn't keep running, and she couldn't hide anymore. The time had come to confront her past and reclaim her future. The night of the confrontation arrived, and the village was eerily quiet. The group of villagers, led by Serafina and Thomas, moved in the shadows, their faces determined. They had no intention of backing down. This was their fight, their chance to reclaim their lives from the woman who had ruled over them for far too long. As they neared the large mansion at the edge of the village, Serafina felt a surge of fear and adrenaline. This was it. There was no turning back now. They reached the gates, and Serafina's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that once they entered, there would be no going back. But she was ready. She had made her choice. "Let's do this," she whispered, turning to face the others. Together. They moved forward, and as they entered the mansion's grand foyer, the familiar scent of power and control hung heavy in the air. Matilda's presence was felt before she was even seen. The woman appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her icy gaze locking onto Serafina. "I knew you would come for me eventually," Matilda said, her voice cold and cruel. "But you'll never win. You can never escape me." Serafina stepped forward, her voice steady and unyielding. "I'm not trying to escape you, Matilda. I'm here to end this. I'm here to take back my life." Matilda's eyes flickered with fury, but she made no move to stop Serafina. "You're foolish, Serafina. You've already made your choice. But you'll regret it." Serafina shook her head. "No. I won't regret it. I've spent too long being afraid of you. And now, I'm done." The room was filled with tension, the air thick with anticipation. The final confrontation had begun. Title: Shadows of the Past. Description: Serafina's life was once dominated by the unrelenting control of Matilda, a woman who ruled with an iron fist and kept Serafina trapped in a world of fear and manipulation. After escaping from Matilda's clutches, Serafina seeks refuge in a quiet village where she builds a new life, free from the suffocating grasp of her past. But when a mysterious man arrives, delivering a chilling message about Matilda's pursuit, Serafina is forced to confront the truth: her past is never far behind. As the walls close in, Serafina must decide whether to keep running or to stand her ground and fight for her freedom. With the support of newfound allies and the wisdom of a village that has accepted her, she faces the ultimate battle, not just for her life, but for the future she's worked so hard to build. In a confrontation that will test her strength and resolve, Serafina must confront the woman who once held her captive and reclaim the life that was always hers to begin with. Shadows of the Past is a story of courage, redemption, and the unyielding power of choice.